Sig Sauer recently released their V2 of the very popular Romeo MSR line of red dots, but is this change enough to convince you to buy? What actually did they change? Does it make it a significantly better red dot to an already good line of red dots? We're going to talk about that in today's video. The MSR is a add-on to the Romeo line of red dots from Sig. The ones you probably know of are the MSR, the Romeo 5, the 8T. There's a couple different variations of the Romeo, but the MSR specifically is Sig's red dot that comes with a dial instead of buttons on it. The MSR has been a great budget option for a very long time and can be had for very, very cheap, but Sig is moving away from this and discontinuing it in order to favor the MSR Gen 2. And even though these are both in the same line of Romeo models, there are very, very big differences between these two, and I think in this case, Sig really did knock it out of the park with their new version of the MSR. So let's get into what is different and similar between these two red dots. If you look at them from just a red dot housing perspective, yes, they are both circle style red dots. They're at the same height, but there are definitely some visible differences between these two red dots. Let's start off with the mount itself. The mounting pattern of both these red dots is still a T2 style red dot mount, which is great because it means these red dots are usable with a wide variety of aftermarket mounts. The mount on the original Gen 1 MSR is a skeletonized version of the mount that you now see on the MSR Gen 2. Funnily enough, and we'll talk about this in another video, the mount you now see on the MSR Gen 2 is the mount from the Romeo 5 Gen 1. It seems they're repurposing this for the new Gen 2. These mounts aren't massively different in structure or use case, but the skeletonized mount on the MSR Gen 1 is weaker than the mount on the Gen 2 just because of its structural design. Yes, it will save a little bit on weight, but you really don't want to be doing that in this fashion with the mount, so I think the mount on the Gen 2 is a much better option. However, the mount on the Romeo MSR Gen 1 features a single recoil lug on the bottom of that mount, which will help for additional strengthening and keeping it from shifting, whereas the MSR Gen 2 features no recoil lugs on the bottom and it is just the single tensioning lug that keeps it in place. This isn't a huge deal, but it should be taken into consideration when we determine mount strengths. In other obvious changes, the MSR Gen 1 comes with flip caps on both the front and the back, and the MSR Gen 2 does not come with flip caps or a way to even mount flip caps if you wanted to. Now, flip caps aren't a necessity in a red dot. Some people like them, some people don't. I personally don't run flip caps on most of my red dots. I think it's easy enough just to clean them off if dirt were to get on them, but I know a lot of people who do like to run flip caps on the red dot, so this comes down to personal preference. The Romeo MSR features dial systems for turning on and off the red dot instead of traditional push-button designs, and the MSR Gen 1 features a top dial, whereas the MSR Gen 2 moves that top dial to the side and enlarges it. I think that Sig moving that top dial to the side is a much more ergonomic decision and really fits the red dot better. These are little things, but I feel though it is easier to turn a dial on the side in a much more natural position than one on the top when this is mounted on a rifle. These dials still have the same functionality, though the top dial on the MSR Gen 1 is smaller in size, and the reason for that we will talk about in a bit. The turrets on these two models are the exact same. The MSR Gen 1 was actually ahead of its time. These same style of turrets are now being used in both the MSR and the new Romeo, and some Holosun red dots. The turrets on the MSR are recessed, they are not capped, which in my opinion is a good improvement. It makes it easier to adjust them, but the way they are designed means it's still going to be very hard to accidentally break them. But this isn't really a choice you have to decide about because both the MSR Gen 1 and the MSR Gen 2 come with the same exact style of turrets. And ending out our visual section, the MSR Gen 1 weighs 4.9 ounces, whereas the MSR Gen 2 weighs 5.7 ounces. There is a difference in weight there, but it is not enough for you to really think about at all. Yes, ounces make all the difference, but at that little of a variation, I don't think that should impact your decision for one over the other. Now into more of the functions and the settings on the red dots. The MSR Gen 1 uses a CR1632 battery, whereas the MSR Gen 2 uses a CR2032 battery. The MSR Gen 2 battery is a much more common battery type in modern red dots, whereas the MSR Gen 1, that battery type is a little bit harder to find, and there's not many red dots currently on the market that use it. For that reason alone, keeping your batteries standardized is something you should try for across your rifles and your setups if you can, and so I think the MSR Gen 2, based on battery, is a better option for keeping that standardized, but I don't think that should be a decision that makes or breaks your setup, just something to consider. Both of these red dots feature the exact same settings when it comes to your dials and your brightness settings, except for battery life, which a lot of this is just determined by the battery type. The MSR Gen 1 says it can have a maximum of 20,000 hours of battery life on a specific setting, whereas the MSR Gen 2, in that same circumstance, can have up to 40,000 hours of battery life. Now, true battery lives on red dots like these are determined by a lot of factors, which setting you leave it on, the conditions you leave it in. But just that being said, yes, your MSR Gen 2 will last longer with that included battery. But outside of that, the settings on these units are the exact same. The reticle is the same, the dot's the same, the options are the same, the way the dial functions is the same, and the settings on that dial are the exact same. So our decisions between these two red dots actually comes to a lot more of their externalities than their individual settings. And in our opinion, the MSR Gen 2 does have significant improvements over the MSR Gen 1 that does make it the better option, especially them being at the comparable price point that they are at. While the MSR Gen 1 does include a recoil lug on the bottom of the mount, which is desirable, the MSR Gen 2 features a bunch more changes over the MSR Gen 1, which we think are preferable, that being the side dial, the mounting system, the battery type, and the battery life. Plus, there were some aesthetic design choices made with the MSR Gen 2, which we think makes it look cooler than the MSR Gen 1, and as we all know, looking cool is half the battle. If that wasn't already enough, your decision to buy the MSR Gen 1 is probably limited in time, since Sig is moving over to their new Gen 2 lineup for the MSR line of red dots. So if you're wondering if you should upgrade your Romeo MSR red dot to the new Gen 2, or if you should purchase this red dot as a standalone red dot, I think that the merits we discussed in this video set apart the MSR as a really great budget red dot system if you're looking for a dial on the side of your red dot. Really, the side dial is the main purchasing factor that comes to purchasing something like the MSR over another option like the Romeo 5, the 8T, the Holosun Aero, or any of those other red dots on the market. And if you are looking for that side dial system, the MSR is an incredible option for that. We will do another video breaking down the MSR specifically and what sets it apart from other red dots on the market, but from a comparisons perspective, I hope this helps. And if you're looking to purchase the MSR Gen 2 or mounts for it, magnifiers for it, whole variety, you can check out the link in the description, defensedistributors.com.